Madison Cooper had fixed a lot of things in her 32 years of life. Cars, boats, toasters, relationships, well, scratch that last one. But nothing in her extensive mechanical repertoire had prepared her for fixing the situation she found herself in now, flat on her back on what was unmistakably an autopsy table. An alien autopsy table. What the actual Maddie blinked rapidly, her vision still blurry from whatever they'd used to knock her out. Above her loomed two figures that definitely weren't human. One had purple skin with what appeared to be gills pulsating on its neck, while the other sported 4 arms and skin the color of a radioactive lime popsicle. Just 12 hours ago, she'd been in her garage in Tucson, tinkering with a carburetor from Mrs. Henderson's 1967 Mustang. Nothing special about the day, just the usual grease under her fingernails and classic rock blaring from her ancient radio. Then the lights had flickered. She'd felt that strange tingling sensation, and boom. Alien operating room. The purple one chittered something to its companion, who responded with a series of clicks and whistles. They seemed completely unfazed by the fact that their specimen was now conscious and staring at them. Hey, whatever you're planning to do with that very sharp-looking thing, I'd really appreciate if you didn't. Maddie's eyes widened as the 4-armed green alien picked up something resembling a cross between a scalpel and a laser pointer. The aliens exchanged glances, at least she thought they did, given that their eyes were situated on different parts of their heads than human eyes. Look, I know you probably don't understand me, but I'm a living, sentient being who really prefers her internal organs to stay internal. So if we could just… The purple one interrupted her with more chattering, then pressed a button on a device attached to its wrist. A holographic display appeared above Maddie's head, showing what looked unnervingly like her skeletal structure. Oh great, you've already X-rayed me, fantastic. Love having my privacy invaded by interstellar perverts. The green alien, whom Maddie mentally dubbed Gleep based on the sound it kept making, moved closer with the laser scalpel thing. No, she thrashed against her restraints, which were surprisingly flimsy. The cuff around her right wrist gave way with a satisfying snap. Both aliens jumped back, emitting high-pitched sounds that might have been surprise or alarm. The purple one, Zork, in Maddie's mental catalogue, frantically pressed more buttons on its wrist device. Maddie felt her initial fear morphing into something else, something hotter, fiercer, indignation. You know what? I've had it up to here with this day. She wrenched her other arm free. First, Mrs. Henderson complains about a perfectly reasonable price quote. Then I spill coffee on my favorite work pants. And now I'm being prepped for dissection by the cast of a bad sci-fi movie. Not happening, buddy. As she sat up, both aliens scrambled backward, knocking over a tray of instruments that clattered to the floor with a symphony of metallic pings. What's wrong? Never seen a human fight back before. Well, get used to it, because where I come from, we don't take kindly to being treated like science projects. Maddie swung her legs over the edge of the table, noticing for the first time that she was still wearing her jeans and tank top, though her boots were missing. Small mercies. Where'd you put my boots? A girl needs her steel toes when she's about to kick some alien. Zork made a dash for what looked like an intercom on the wall. Maddie was faster. Years of sliding under cars had made her quick despite her compact frame. She lunged across the room, grabbing a cylindrical object from a nearby counter and hurling it at the intercom. Direct hit. The device sparked and went silent. The communications temporarily suspended, she said with mock sweetness. Now, about those boots. Gleep had backed into a corner, all 4 arms raised in what might have been surrender or simply confusion. One of those arms was clutching something that looked suspiciously like. Those are my boots. Hand them over, Kermit. The alien didn't move until she stepped toward it. Then it panicked, throwing the boots at her and making a break for the door, which slid open automatically. Zork followed close behind, both aliens tripping over each other in their haste to escape. And stay out. Maddie called after them as she stuffed her feet back into her beloved work boots. Lousy hospitality. 0 stars. Would not recommend. The momentary victory was short-lived. An alarm began to blare, and the light in the lab shifted from white to a pulsating red. Great. She'd triggered some kind of security protocol. Maddie quickly scanned the room for anything useful. The alien lab equipment was bizarre, but somehow familiar. She could recognize cooling systems, power supplies, and what looked like diagnostic tools. Before she could grab anything, the door slid open again. This time, a taller alien entered. It had blue-gray skin and wore something resembling a uniform with insignias Maddie couldn't begin to decode. Its face tentacles, because of course it had face tentacles, were quivering with what Maddie assumed was rage. Human specimen 7729C, you are violating containment protocols. The voice came from a small device around the alien's neck, translating its gurgling speech into slightly stilted English. Maddie's jaw dropped. You speak English? Well, that would have been helpful 5 minutes ago when your purple pal was about to carve me up like a Thanksgiving turkey. The blue alien's tentacles bristled. I am Laboratory Director Rex. You will return to the examination table immediately. Yeah, I don't think so, Squidward. Here's a counteroffer. You point me toward the exit, and I won't dismantle your entire lab piece by piece. Rex's eyes narrowed, all three of them. Security protocols have been initiated. Resistance is. If you say futile, I swear I'll start ripping out wiring just for spite. Behind Rex, Maddie spotted something on a nearby workstation. It looked like the translator device the alien was wearing, if she could get to it. She feinted left, then dove right, sliding across a surprisingly slippery floor to snatch the device. Rex lunged for her but missed, tentacles grasping at empty air. Ha! Maddie quickly fastened the translator around her neck. Now we're on equal footing, conversation-wise. The device hummed to life, and suddenly the chittering and clicks from the returned Zork and Gleep transformed into words. Absolutely unprecedented breach of. Director Rex will have our exoskeletons for this. He might have contaminated the entire sterile environment. Maddie cleared her throat loudly. I can understand you now, by the way. All three aliens froze, staring at her. So let's start over. My name is Madison Cooper. I fix things for a living. And if you try to dissect me again, I will personally ensure that every piece of equipment in this room stops working permanently. Are we clear? Rex's translator crackled. This violation of protocol is unacceptable. The specimen cannot be permitted to. The specimen, Maddie interrupted, has a name and opposable thumbs, and a pretty good understanding of mechanical systems, judging by that cooling unit over there that's about to overheat. She pointed to a humming device in the corner where a small warning light was indeed flashing red. The alien's attention swiveled to the machine, then back to her. How did you know that? Gleep asked, voice tinny through the translator. Maddie smiled. Maybe she had found some leverage after all. That cooling unit is running at about 30% efficiency, Maddie said, casually leaning against a console. You've got the thermal regulator completely misaligned with the exhaust port. Amateur hour. The three aliens exchanged glances. Impossible, Rex declared. Our technology is far superior to anything your species has developed. Superior, maybe. Well maintained? Not so much. Maddie walked over to the cooling unit and pointed to where a blue-tinted mist was escaping from a loose connection. See that? You're venting coolant, and these gaskets are completely shot. Gleep moved closer, all four eyes blinking rapidly. The unit has been malfunctioning for 3 cycle rotations. Our technicians cannot identify the source. Well, your technicians need glasses, or whatever the equivalent is for. Whatever you are. A loud pop from the cooling unit punctuated her statement, followed by a more insistent hissing. The warning light began to blink faster. That doesn't sound good, Maddie observed. Rex's tentacles writhed anxiously. If that unit fails, the containment samples in the adjacent laboratory will be compromised. Containment samples? What kind of samples? Pathogens from 17 different planetary systems, Zork supplied helpfully. Pathogens. As in diseases. As in, If this thing blows, we're all getting space plague. Maddie pinched the bridge of her nose. Okay, move aside. Before anyone could stop her, she knelt beside the unit, examining the control panel. The interface was alien, but the principles of cooling systems were apparently universal. She spotted the problem immediately. You've got the equivalent of a clogged filter and a pinched line. Basic maintenance stuff. She reached for what appeared to be an access panel. Railways. Stop, Rex ordered. You cannot touch our equipment. Their hissing grew louder. A new alarm joined the first. Look, Tentacles, you've got two options. Let me fix this, or explain to your bosses why you let a primitive human watch while your lab turned into an interstellar petri dish. Time stretched as Rex deliberated, face appendages twitching in what might have been the alien equivalent of a nervous tic. Proceed, it finally said, but under supervision. Whatever. Hand me that. Maddie pointed to a tool that resembled a wrench. 30 seconds later, she had the panel off. 1 minute after that, she'd identified the issue exactly what she'd suspected. 2 minutes later, with some improvised help from her own belt serving as a temporary gasket, the cooling unit was humming smoothly, warning lights off. She stood, wiping her hands on her jeans. There. That buys you maybe 48 hours before you need a proper replacement gasket. The alien stared at her, then at the machine, then back at her. How did you know how to repair it? Gleep's voice held something new respect. I told you. I fix things. Cars, mostly, but machines are machines. They all work on the same basic principles, even your fancy alien stuff. She glanced around the lab. Speaking of which, that diagnostic scanner over there is drawing way more power than it should be. And that data terminal? The connection port is corroded. Zork approached the terminal and examined it. She's right, Director. Rex's posture changed subtly. The rigid authority figure softened just slightly. Perhaps we have underestimated your species' technical aptitude. Yeah, think? Where I come from, you don't last long as a mechanic if you can't improvise. Maddie crossed her arms. So here's my proposal. I'm not going back on that table. But I might be willing to take a look at some of your other equipment issues, in exchange for not being dissected. Rex was silent for a long moment, tentacles moving in what might have been complex calculations. Your proposal has merit, it finally said. A temporary arrangement may be beneficial to both parties. Great. First, I want a proper tour of this place, and some food would be nice. Abducting aliens aside, your hospitality leaves a lot to be desired. The tour of the lab complex was eye-opening. The facility was massive, with dozens of research stations and equipment that made Maddie's fingers itch to explore. More surprising was the number of alien species working there, at least 7 different types that she could identify. So, Maddie said, between bites of what she'd been assured was safe for human consumption, it tasted like overripe bananas and pine nuts. Why are you studying humans anyway? We can't possibly be the most interesting species you've encountered. They had stopped in what appeared to be some kind of break room. Rex sat across from her, while Gleep worked on a nearby console. Zork had been reassigned elsewhere after the containment breach incident. Your species presents a fascinating anomaly, Rex explained. Despite relatively simple technology, you display exceptional adaptability and problem-solving capabilities. Your approach to mechanical systems is particularly unorthodox. Unorthodox? You mean practical? You utilize redundancies and mechanical backup systems where most advanced species rely solely on quantum computing and molecular fabrication. Because mechanical backups don't crash when the power goes out, Maddie said with a shrug. Basic common sense. A new alien approached their table smaller than the others, with golden-orange skin and just 2 arms. It wore what looked like an intern's version of the lab uniform. Director Rex, it said hesitantly. The recalibration team requests your presence in Section 7. Not now, Blim. I'm conducting an interview with the human specimen. Subject, Maddie corrected. Or better yet, Maddie. Blim's large eyes blinked at her. You speak our language? Universal translator. She pointed to the device. Though your English is better than Rex's. I've studied Earth communications extensively, Blim said with what Maddie recognized as enthusiasm regardless of species. Your internet contains fascinating information, though much of it appears contradictory or fictional. That's the internet for you, Maddie laughed. The lights flickered suddenly. A low hum that Maddie had barely noticed in the background faltered, then resumed. What was that? She asked. Rex and Blim exchanged glances. A minor fluctuation in the power grid, Rex said dismissively. And is this minor fluctuation related to why Section 7 needs recalibration? Blim's skin color shifted slightly. The main propulsion stabilizers have been experiencing cascading failures for several rotations. It's affecting all systems on the... And Blim. Rex cut in sharply. That information is not relevant to our current discussion. Maddie set down her food. Propulsion stabilizers. Wait, are we on a ship? The silence answered her question. We're on a spaceship. A spaceship with failing engines, and you're studying humans instead of fixing your ride. The study of emerging intelligent species is our primary mission, Rex said stiffly. A dedicated engineering team is addressing the stabilizer issue. Another flicker of the lights. How's that working out for you? Maddie asked dryly. Blim's translator couldn't quite capture what might have been a snort of laughter. Our engineers are highly qualified, Rex insisted. Yet your cooling unit was about to blow, your terminals are corroded, and your ship is having power fluctuations. Forgive me if I'm not impressed with the qualifications. The lights dimmed completely for 3 seconds before returning. That's getting worse, Maddie observed. How long until these stabilizers completely fail? Rex's tentacles twisted in agitation. That is not your concern. It is if I'm on the ship when it happens. What exactly will happen if they fail? We drift? Crash? Explode? Blim answered before Rex could stop them. The artificial gravity would fail first, followed by life support systems. If the main reactor loses containment, there is a 78.3% probability of catastrophic molecular disintegration. Disintegration? As in, we all turn into space dust? Essentially, yes. Maddie looked at Rex. And you didn't think this was worth mentioning while you were planning to dissect me? The situation is under control, Rex insisted. Another power fluctuation. Longer this time. Sure it is. Maddie stood up. Take me to Section 7. I want to see these stabilizers. Absolutely not, Rex began, but was interrupted as an alarm began to sound different from the one in the lab earlier. A voice echoed through the room in the alien's language, then switched to various others, including English, warning. Stabilizer efficiency at 27%. All non-essential personnel evacuate to secure sections. Blim looked panicked. That's a 12% drop since last shift rotation. Maddie met Rex's three-eyed stare. You were saying? About having things under control? This is highly irregular, but Rex's tentacles performed what might have been the alien equivalent of a resigned sigh. Blim, escort Maddie to Section 7. I will inform the engineering team. As they hurried down corridors increasingly filled with alarmed-looking aliens of various species, Maddie turned to Blim. So, quick question. If I help fix your ship, what's in it for me besides not dying in space? Blim blinked rapidly. What would you want? For starters? A guarantee that no one tries to dissect me again, and a ticket home when this is all over. I cannot promise such things without authorization, but given the circumstances, I believe accommodations could be made. Maddie grinned. Then let's go save some alien butts. Section 7 was chaos. Aliens rushed in all directions, displays flashed warning messages in multiple languages, and the constant fluctuation of power made the lights flicker like a haunted house attraction. The stabilizers themselves were massive 3 cylindrical columns that stretched from floor to ceiling, connected by a web of conduits and cables. Even to Maddie's untrained eye, something was obviously wrong. The central column pulsed with erratic blue light, while the other two were almost dark. A group of aliens huddled around a control console, arguing in rapid-fire technical language that even the translator had trouble keeping up with. Molecular cohesion failing at an exponential rate. Tried rerouting through the secondary matrix. Quantum fluctuations are beyond acceptable parameters. G singal. Dien tubar. Dier dodigoind. Maddie cleared her throat loudly. All 6 aliens turned to stare at her. These who authorized a human in this section. He demanded one with metallic scales and what appeared to be augmented visual sensors. I did, said Vrex, appearing behind Maddie. This human has demonstrated exceptional mechanical aptitude. With all due respect, Director, we do not have time to babysit a primitive species while trying to prevent a catastrophic failure. Maddie bristled. This primitive fixed your cooling unit while your tech team was still trying to figure out which end of the wrench to hold. The scaly alien's augmented eyes whirred as they focused on her. A cooling unit is not a quantum stabilizer. No, but they both run on the same principles of thermodynamics and power regulation. Show me your diagnostics. After a tense moment, the alien stepped aside. Maddie approached the console, studying the displays. The data was complex, but the problem was becoming clear. You've got uneven power distribution. This stabilizer is taking all the load while these two are barely functioning. We are aware of the symptom, said the scaly alien. We cannot identify the cause. Maddie leaned closer, tracing the power flow diagrams with her finger. It's not the stabilizers themselves, it's your power routing. Look, the junction nodes are completely out of sync. She pointed to what appeared to be connection points between the stabilizers and the ship's power grid. We've recalibrated the nodes 17 times, protested another alien engineer. You're treating it as a software problem when it's hardware, Maddie said. Those nodes are physically damaged, probably microfractures from stress. The system keeps trying to compensate, which is why it looks like a calibration issue. The engineers exchanged glances. That is a possibility we had not considered, admitted the scaly one. Of course not. You're too focused on your fancy quantum whatever. Sometimes the problem is just a broken pipe. Maddie turned to Vrex. I need to see the actual nodes. More power fluctuations, longer this time. The ship shuddered slightly. Take her to the junction access, Vrex ordered. 10 minutes later, Maddie was elbow deep in alien technology, lying on her back in a maintenance tunnel that reminded her of working under a car, except the car was a massive spaceship hurtling through the void. Hand me that, she called out to Blim, who had insisted on assisting her. The molecular resonator? Whatever you call the thing that looks like a socket wrench with lights. Blim passed her the tool. Maddie carefully removed a panel, exposing the junction node. Sure enough, hairline fractures webbed across its surface, barely visible even with the specialized light Blim held for her. Audit. Stress fractures. The power flow is arsing unpredictably across these breaks instead of channeling properly. Can it be repaired? Blim asked anxiously. Easily without replacement parts. But I can rig a bypass that should stabilize things temporarily. For the next hour, Maddie worked feverishly, directing the alien engineers in creating a jury-rigged bypass system that would redistribute the power load evenly while avoiding the damaged nodes. It wasn't pretty. An Earth mechanic might have called it held together with duct tape and prayers, but as the last connection was secured, the ship's hum steadied and the lights stopped flickering. She emerged from the maintenance tunnel sweaty and grease-stained but triumphant, to find a crowd of aliens staring at her with what might have been awe. The lead engineer's augmented eyes whirred. The stabilizers are at 78% efficiency and rising. Told you it was a hardware problem, Maddie said, wiping her hands on her already filthy jeans. This solution. The engineer hesitated. It is not in any of our technical manuals. That's because sometimes you need to improvise. Manuals are guidelines, not gospel. A commotion at the entrance to Section 7 drew everyone's attention. A new alien had arrived larger than Vrex, with ornate decorations on its uniform and a bearing that screamed authority figure. What, it demanded in a booming voice, is a research specimen doing in a critical engineering section? Vrex stepped forward. Admiral Krell, I can explain. This human should be in containment, not interfering with ship operations. Maddie crossed her arms. This human just saved your ship while your engineers were debating quantum theory. Admiral Krell's multiple eyes narrowed. Impossible. No primitive species could understand our technology. Funny thing about machines, Admiral, Maddie said, stepping forward despite Blim's warning tug on her sleeve. They don't care how advanced you think you are. They break the same way everywhere. She pointed to the display showing the stabilizer efficiency, now at 82% and still climbing. The bypass is holding, reported the lead engineer. The human solution appears to be working. A temporary coincidence, the Admiral insisted. Maybe, Maddie conceded. But while we're on the subject of coincidences, I noticed some interesting design flaws in your propulsion system while I was down there. Your power relay configuration wastes about 30% of your energy output, and those coolant lines, running them so close to the heat exchangers is just asking for molecular degradation. The room went silent. The Admiral's eyes swiveled from Maddie to the engineers, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Is this accurate? It demanded. The lead engineer's sensors whirred anxiously. We have noted some inefficiencies in the current design. Inefficiencies you were unable to resolve, yet this human identified them within an hour. To be fair, Maddie interjected, sometimes an outside perspective helps. You get too used to seeing things one way, you miss the obvious. Admiral Krell studied her for a long moment, then turned to Vrex. I want a full report on this human's capabilities, and a complete evaluation of our engineering protocols. It paused, mandibles clicking slightly. Perhaps our assessment of Earth technology requires revision. 3 days later, Maddie sat across from Vrex in what she'd come to think of as the alien's office. The ship was running smoothly, the stabilizers were holding at 91% efficiency, and she'd helped implement a dozen other primitive improvements to various systems. So, she said, leaning back in a chair that had been specially adjusted for human anatomy, about that ticket home. Vrex's tentacles moved in what Maddie now recognized as thoughtful consideration. The Science Directorate has reviewed your contributions to ship operations, it said finally. They are impressed. They should be. I've saved you at least 20% on power consumption and probably prevented a catastrophic meltdown. Indeed. Which is why I have been authorized to make you an offer. Maddie raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. We would like to create a new position, human technical consultant. You would advise our engineering teams on practical applications and efficiency improvements. You want to hire me? Right, with appropriate compensation, of course, and guaranteed protection under our sentient rights protocols. Maddie couldn't help but laugh. So instead of dissecting me, you want to put me on the payroll? Your unique perspective has proven valuable. I'd need occasional trips back to Earth. I'm not abandoning my home planet entirely. It could be arranged. We maintain regular observation missions to your solar system. Maddie leaned forward. And what about other humans? No more abductions for dissection? Vrex's tentacles twisted uncomfortably. The Science Directorate has authorized me to inform you that research protocols regarding Earth specimens are being revised. Future interactions will be voluntary and compensated. Diplo. By. Upholston. Damn right they will be. Maddie stood and walked to the viewport that showed the stars streaking by. I want that in writing. And I want a proper workspace, not a converted storage closet. And I'll need an assistant who doesn't freak out every time I use non-standard repair methods. Blim has already volunteered for that position. Maddie smiled. She'd grown fond of the enthusiastic junior researcher. Good choice. Then we have an agreement? Vrex extended a tentacle in what it had learned was the human custom of handshakes. Maddie took it carefully. We do. But I have one more condition, which is C. Next time you encounter a new species, try saying hello before strapping them to an autopsy table. X wonders for interstellar relations. 6 months later, Maddie stood in a newly constructed practical engineering division, her division. A dozen alien engineers from various species worked at stations around the room, all implementing what the official documentation now called Cooper methodology, a fancy term for if it's stupid but works, it isn't stupid. Blim hurried in, carrying a data pad. The modifications to the long-range sensors have increased efficiency by 27%. Admiral Krell is most pleased. Of course he is. Maddie smiled. When are the new human recruits arriving? The transport vessel returns from Earth next cycle rotation. 3 mechanical engineers, 2 software specialists, and a plumber. A plumber? You specifically requested someone who understands how things really flow, did you not? Maddie laughed. I did indeed. Make sure their quarters are ready. She turned back to her workstation, where a secured channel to Earth glowed with a waiting message. The beginning of a formal technology exchange program carefully curated to prevent too much advanced tech from overwhelming her home planet at once. You know, she said to Blim 6 months ago, I was just fixing carburetors in Arizona. Now I'm arranging interstellar tech swaps. The universe works in surprising ways, Blim observed philosophically. That it does. Maddie glanced around her domain, a lab full of aliens learning from a human they'd once considered primitive. Just goes to show, never underestimate a mechanic with a socket wrench and an attitude. Blim's translator didn't quite capture the nuance of Maddie's expression, but the meaning was universal enough. Humanity might not have the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but they sure as hell knew how to make it work. Remind me to tell Admiral Krell about my ideas for the warp drive efficiency, Maddie said with a mischievous grin. I figure we can squeeze another 15% out of it if we just stop overthinking the problem. Overthinking is something my species excels at, Blim admitted. And fixing things is what mine excels at, Maddie replied. Seems like a match made in the stars. Outside the viewport, those stars stretched into infinity, a universe full of advanced civilizations about to learn that sometimes the simplest solution was the right one. And humans were very, very good at simple solutions.